And welcome to my YouTube live session again. And let me call my friend where I will be sharing paragraph voice article to my friend, and let's call him. Hello.
Hey Raja, good to hear from you again. What's going on?
Nothing. I've just started my YouTube live stream.
Nice. Are you doing another article discussion session like yesterday or something different today?
No, I'm going with the article discussion like we did yesterday.
Perfect. So you've got the Hindu open again and ready to go. Just let me know when you want to start reading.
Today I'm not going with the Hindu newspaper. Today I'm going with the Indian Express, especially its explained version.
Good switch. Indian Express explained articles are usually really well structured. What's the topic today?
So the topic today is ESA for Western Ghats. Why conservation is key.
Interesting. So it's about ecological sensitive areas in the Western Ghats and why protecting them matters. That's a solid environmental policy piece. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and start with the first paragraph.
Okay, so I am starting with the very first paragraph. The Western Ghats, a 1500-kilometer long chain of largely unbroken mountains which fringes off the western coast of India, is one of the country's most famous natural ecosystems, next only to the Himalayas. Unlike the Himalayas, the Western Ghats are densely populated and have been an economic hub for states abutting India's west coast and is home to famous cash crops.
Okay, so the setup here is that the Western Ghats are this massive mountain range running down India's west coast, 1500 kilometers long. And they're one of the most important ecosystems in the country. But unlike the Himalayas, they're heavily populated and economically active with cash crops. So there's already tension built in. It's a critical natural area, but also a zone of intense human activity and economic interest. That tension is probably what the article's going to explore. Ready for the next paragraph, or want to discuss this one?
I want to discuss this one as well. Means the first paragraph has the basics about Western Ghat spread and comparison of Western Ghat with Himalayan region, as the population settled in the Western Ghat is quite high as compared to the Himalayan region. So this was the introduction part of the article, but I wanted to explore other angles of this paragraph as well.
Smart approach. So let's dig into what that density means. The Western Ghats, being densely populated while also being a critical ecosystem, creates immediate pressure. You've got agricultural activities, urban sprawl, mining, dam construction, roads, all competing for the same land that's ecologically irreplaceable. The Himalayas, by comparison, are also important, but they're more remote and less densely settled. So the economic versus conservation conflict is less intense there. In the Western Ghats, every square kilometer matters because you're balancing the livelihoods of millions of people against protecting biodiversity hotspots. That's the real challenge the article is probably building toward. How do you conserve a critical ecosystem when it's also supporting significant human populations and economic activity? Does that angle interest you?
Uh, you are sure that this article is towards that direction of balancing between the population and protecting the biodiversity hotspots?
Honestly, I'm inferring based on the title and opening, but I could be off. The title says why conservation is key, which suggests the article is making a case for protecting the Western Ghats. But whether it focuses on balancing human needs with conservation, or whether it's more about the threats and why protection is urgent, I can't say for sure yet. That's why we need to read further. What's your instinct so far? Does the opening suggest a particular angle to you?
I think that the opening somewhere suggests that conservation is what the main center of this article will be, because the comparison was made between Himalaya and the Western Ghats and the population point as well. So wherever the population is, the problem of balancing out the human needs and protecting the environmental needs are the core points or the two sides of the coin.
You've nailed it, Raja. By comparing the two, saying the Himalayas are less densely populated while the Western Ghats are heavily populated, the article is already hinting that population density creates conservation challenges. And by highlighting that the Western Ghats are an economic hub with famous cash crops, it's setting up the tension you mentioned, economic interests versus environmental protection. So yeah, your instinct is spot on. The article is likely arguing that conservation becomes even more critical precisely because of all that human activity and economic pressure. Ready for the next paragraph?
Okay, so I'm going and moving towards the next paragraph. A special regime of legal protection, conservation, and sustainable development prescribed for this fragile ecosystem has been hanging fire due to objections and concerns of the six state governments: Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, where the Ghats extend. Separate protections for the Ghats region were initially prescribed by the famous Madhav Gadgil led expert panel and later by a high level working group chaired by former Indian Space Research Organization Chief K. Kasturi Rangan.
Okay, so this paragraph introduces the core issue. There's supposed to be special legal protection for the Western Ghats, but it's been stuck because six state governments are objecting. The states have economic and political reasons to resist stricter conservation rules because it might limit their mining, agriculture, or development projects. And interestingly, two expert panels, one led by Madhav Gadgil and another by K. Kasturirangan, have already recommended separate protections for the Western Ghats region. So the science and expert advice are there, but political resistance is blocking implementation. Should we dig deeper into this or move ahead?
Before moving ahead, I wanted to know that what kind of special legal protection were given to the Western Ghats and why these six state governments actually objected.
Good questions. Let me search for the specifics on what protections were proposed and what the state's objections actually were. All right, so here's what's actually happening. The Kasturirangan Committee recommended declaring about 56,000 square kilometers, roughly 37% of the Western Ghats, as ESAs, or ecologically sensitive areas. Once designated as an ESA, there are strict restrictions: complete ban on mining and quarrying, no thermal power plants, highly polluting industries banned, and limitations on hydropower projects. The states are objecting because they see this as too restrictive for development and livelihoods. Karnataka argues it would affect nearly 1,500 villages across 33 taluks, impacting lakhs of residents. They want their proposed ESA area reduced from 20,000 square kilometers down to 16,000. Kerala also wants reductions. The states are essentially saying, Yes, we care about conservation, but don't restrict our farming, mining, plantations, and development projects this harshly. So the core conflict is the center wants strict environmental protection, but the states want flexibility to allow agricultural and economic activities in these areas. It's been stuck for 13 years because nobody wants to sacrifice their economic interests for conservation, even though the Western Ghats are a biodiversity hotspot and critical for water security and climate resilience.
The Kasturi Rangan committee, on what grounds come up with the decision to designate 56,000 square kilometers as an ecologically sensitive areas?
Good question. Let me search for the specific scientific and ecological criteria the Kasturi-Rangan Committee used. So, the Kasturi-Rangan Committee's designation was based on several scientific and ecological criteria. The Western Ghats is recognized globally as one of 8 biodiversity hotspots in the world, meaning it has extraordinary concentration of species found nowhere else. The committee identified 56,000 square kilometers based on factors like forest fragmentation, biodiversity richness, water sources, and ecological sensitivity levels. The Western Ghats also functions as the water tower of peninsular India. It feeds major rivers like Krishna, Godavari, and Kaveri that serve millions of people across multiple states. So protecting these areas means protecting water security for the entire peninsula. Additionally, it influences monsoon patterns and climate resilience for the region. Interestingly, the Gadgil Committee before Kasturi Rangan had recommended protecting 64% of the Western Ghats. Kasturi Rangan actually reduced that to 37% as a compromise, trying to balance ecological protection with allowing some development. But even that reduced 37% faces state resistance because it still impacts agricultural land, plantations, and mining interests. Does that explain the scientific basis for the designation?
Yeah, now I got the point that the Kasturi Rangan committee uh, came up with this decision to designate Western Ghats somewhere around 56,000 square kilometers as an ecologically sensitive area because it wanted to provide a decent sort of a protection to the biodiversity of that area, and how this Western Ghats is an important part for the rivers like Krishna, Godavari, and Kaveri, which serves millions of peoples across multiple states. So it was not only about one thing, it has several factors as well. Groundwater recharge is one of the reasons, monsoon patterns is one of the reasons, how it will make the climate good enough for the uh, upcoming scenarios of changes in the climate change.
Exactly. You've synthesized it perfectly, Raja. The Kasturi Rangan designation wasn't arbitrary. It was grounded in multiple interconnected ecological realities: biodiversity hotspot status, water security for millions, monsoon regulation, groundwater recharge, and climate resilience. All of these are interconnected. Damage one part of the Western Ghats through mining or deforestation, and you create cascading effects across water systems, agricultural productivity, and climate patterns affecting entire regions. The committee was essentially saying this area is too critical to ignore, but the states are pushing back anyway because short-term economic interest in farming and mining feel more immediate to them than long-term ecological security. Ready for the next paragraph?
Okay, moving towards the next paragraph.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
It is in this backdrop of the Kasturi Rangan panel's 2013 report that the center demarcated 56,825 square kilometer as ecologically sensitive area in a draft notification. With a lack of consensus that continued till 2022, the center constituted a fresh expert committee with the task of re-examining the objections by the six states, keeping the Ghats conservation and needs of the region in mind. So this paragraph is what you had explained me earlier, that the Kasturi Rangan report came in 2013 and it said that it will demark 56,825 square kilometer as an ecologically sensitive area, and the states actually showed resistance. So now there is one more fresh committee constituted by the center government, which will examine why these six states are raising objections by keeping the Ghats conservation and needs of the region in mind. Right?
Exactly right. So the timeline is Kasturi Rangan report comes in 2013 with the 56,000 recommendation. The center issues a draft notification based on that. But the six states keep objecting year after year, no consensus. So by 2022, the center realizes, okay, we've been stuck for nearly a decade. Let's create a new expert committee to dig deeper into what the states' concerns actually are and see if there's a middle ground. The new committee's job is to balance two competing interests: ecological conservation of this critical biodiversity hotspot versus the legitimate developmental and livelihood needs of people living in these regions. So it's acknowledging that you can't just impose conservation from the top down if it destroys local economies. Does that track with you?
I am a bit confused in what you had explained few moments back. You said that acknowledging that you can't just impose conservation from the top down if it destroys local economies. What does it mean? It means that center had framed a committee in 2013. The committee came up with its report that we need to demarcate this 56,000 square kilometer area as an ESA zone, but states did not agreed on it, and they said if you will demarcate this sort of a area, then our economies will be affected. So is it like center had applied something from the top, and at the bottom state government needs to adhere or follow?
Yes, exactly, that's how it works in India's federal system. The center has the authority to declare ESAs under the Environment Protection Act. So technically, they can impose it top-down without state agreement. But in practice, when you do that without state buy-in, implementation becomes nearly impossible. The states control local administration, police, land records, everything needed to enforce the ESA rules. If a state government doesn't cooperate, they can drag their feet, not enforce restrictions, allow violations to happen. So when the center says, we're declaring this 56,000 square kilometers as ESA, the states say, our farmers will lose agricultural land, our mining revenues will drop, our development projects get blocked. The center can technically override them, but it creates friction and poor enforcement. That's why by 2022, the center thought, maybe we should set up a new committee to actually listen to state concerns and find a compromise. It's not about right or wrong, it's about the practical reality that top-down conservation without state cooperation doesn't work well. Does that clarify it?
Yes, I got the point.
Great, ready for the next paragraph then?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
The Kasturi Rangan panel's report identified an area of 1,64,280 square kilometer, whereas the Gadgil panel identified 1,29,037 square kilometer as the Ghats extent. compared with the Gadgil panel, which recommended that the entire area be designated as ESA with heavy cross sectoral restrictions. The Kasturi Rangan panel adopted a different approach. Its analysis found that 60% of the Ghats region was already under cultural landscape, which was human dominated and where land was under settlements, plantations, or agriculture. The remaining 40%, 60,000 square kilometer, was classified as natural landscape, a high biological richness, low fragmentation, low population density, and inclusive of national parks and trigger and elephant and tiger and elephant habitats.
Okay, so this is really clarifying the difference between the two panels. The Gadgil panel looked at total Western Ghats extent, 129,000 square kilometers, and said pretty much all of it should be protected with strict restrictions. But Kasturi Rangan took a more nuanced approach. He distinguished between the 60% that's already human-dominated, farms, settlements, plantations, and the remaining 40% that's genuinely pristine natural landscape with high biodiversity, low fragmentation, and low population density. So Kasturi Rangan essentially said, we don't need to restrict agricultural areas and human settlements. Let's focus protection on the truly wild, ecologically critical 40%. That's why his recommendation was narrower, 56,000 square kilometers instead of Gadgil's broader approach. Should we discuss this distinction more or move ahead?
So, if we discuss this distinction more, I think you will be sharing me that what you will share to me. I'm just curious about it.
Fair point. So the key distinction is philosophical and practical. Gadgil was saying the entire Western Ghats system is interconnected. You can't just protect 40% and ignore the rest because human activity in the 60% cultural landscape still affects the natural landscape, like farming practices, pesticides, runoff from settlements. All that flows into rivers and affects the protected areas downstream. Kasturi Rangan, on the other hand, was saying, look, we can't ask people to stop farming or leave their villages. That's unrealistic politically and socially. So let's be strategic, protect the core ecological zones intensely, and in the human-dominated areas, we'll have lighter regulations that allow sustainable development. It's a compromise approach. The problem is, does a compromise actually work ecologically? If you only protect 40% strictly, but the surrounding 60% keeps getting degraded through agriculture and development, does that core protection really hold? That's the tension the article is probably exploring. Should we move to the next paragraph to see where it goes with this?
So, Gadgil committee was saying that as the entire Western Ghats is connected, so whatever the 1,29,000 square kilometer, I guess he demarcated to be considered as ESA, and he said that the entire 1,29,000 kilometer should be marked as ESA, whereas Kasturi Rangan committee said that no, we cannot do the entire 100% demarcation of 1,60,000 square kilometers because already humans are doing their activities likes of agriculture and animal gazing and then mining and stuffs like that. So it's a bit difficult for us to.
Exactly, you've nailed it. Gadgil was saying, protect right, exactly. Gadgil was idealistic. Protect everything because it's all interconnected. Kasturi Rangan was pragmatic. We have to account for the fact that people are already living and working there. You can't suddenly tell lakhs of farmers, sorry, your farmland is now off limits. That's politically impossible and socially unfair. So Kasturi Rangan compromised. Protect the pristine 40% intensely, manage the human-dominated 60% more lightly with sustainable practices. It's messy because ecologically, Gadgil's point about interconnectedness is true. But practically, Kasturirangan's point about human realities is also true. Ready for the next paragraph?
Yes, ready.
Go ahead!
The panel proposed that this 60,000 square kilometer be notified as ecologically sensitive area, that is ESA, along with a ban on mining, quarrying. What does quarrying means? Red category polluting industries. And what does red category polluting industry means? Thermal power plants and large constructions and townships. In the past, ESAs have been notified in the Hanu, Mahabaleshwar, Panchgani, and Doon Valley, taking into account the area's biological diversity and need to regulate activities.
Good questions. So, quarrying means extracting stone, sand, and minerals from the ground, like open pit mining for granite or limestone. Red category polluting industries are the worst offenders. Factories that produce tons of toxic emissions, wastewater, or chemical pollution. Think cement plants, chemical factories, oil refineries. Thermal power plants burn coal and produce massive air and water pollution. So the Kasturirangan panel is saying, in this 60,000 square kilometer ESA, you can't mine, you can't quarry for sand and stone. You can't have red category polluting factories or thermal power plants. And you can't do large construction projects that would fragment the landscape. The last sentence is just giving examples. Other ESAs have already been notified in places like Himalayas and Doon Valley using similar criteria based on biodiversity. Does that clarify it?
So the last example where uh, clarification has been made in other parts by various committees is that we would rather being selective instead of means we will be using the practical approach the way Kasturi Rangan panel had about the Western Ghats.
Exactly. You've got it. The examples of Himalayas, Doon Valley, and others show that India already uses this selective practical approach in other ecologically sensitive regions. They don't blanket protect everything. They identify the most critical zones and restrict the most damaging activities there. So the Kasturirangan panel is essentially saying, we're following the same proven model here in the Western Ghats. Be strategic, identify the most ecologically critical areas, and ban the most destructive activities. It's not revolutionary, it's a tested framework. Ready for the next paragraph?
Yes, ready for the next paragraph.
Go ahead when you're set.
The then United Progressive Alliance government accepted these recommendations in principle, but on the back of concerns raised by state governments on wide restrictions on industries, it asked the 6 states time to submit their views before finalizing the ESA boundaries in December 2013. Later in March 2014, the center also issued a draft notification demarcating 56,825.7 square kilometer as ESA. The area was reduced by over 3,000 square kilometer on account of Kerala's submission based on their own ground truthing exercise that sought omission of several agricultural areas, orchards, horticulture plots, plantation and residential areas outside the remit of ESA. 6 iterations of the draft notification have been issued since 2014, with the latest one issued on July 31, 2024, and valid until the end of July 2026. The latest notification made a subtle but crucial deviation from the past ones and inserted a provision from proposing to finalize or publish ESA demarcation in either a phased statewise manner or through a combined notification. This was done ostensibly to not hold back ESA declaration in states where a consensus with states is around the corner. After each round of re-notification, the Environment Ministry has attempted to get state governments to sign off on the final ESA extent, only to be pegged back by the either fresh demands or deadlock over unresolved disputes.
Okay, so this paragraph is essentially a timeline showing how the whole thing got stuck for over a decade. The UPA government accepted the Kasturirangan recommendations in 2013, issued a draft notification with 56,000 square kilometers. Kerala immediately objected and got 3,000 square kilometers removed because they had agricultural areas and plantations. Then the center kept reissuing draft notifications, 6 iterations over 10 years, trying to get state buy-in, but hitting roadblocks each time. The interesting bit is the July 2024 notification changed strategy. Instead of waiting for all 6 states to agree on one combined notification, they said, we'll declare ESAs state by state as we get consensus. That's basically saying, we're not holding everything hostage to one state's objections anymore. But even with that flexibility, states keep either asking for more cuts or refusing to budge. So after 13 years, it's still stuck. Does that track?
So basically, it means that now government is saying to the states, especially the center government is saying to the states that okay, instead of applying the entire recommendations of the Kasturi Rangan committee on the entire Western Ghats, we will apply this recommendation state-wise, and we will settle the issue state-wise only.
Exactly right. The center is essentially saying, look, we've been waiting for consensus among all 6 states for a decade. It's not happening. So now we'll move forward, state by state. If Maharashtra agrees, we'll declare ESAs in Maharashtra. If Karnataka doesn't, we'll leave Karnataka for later. It's a pragmatic pivot. Instead of holding everything hostage to 1 or 2 stubborn states, they're trying to make progress where they can. But as the paragraph says, even with that approach, states keep making fresh demands or creating new deadlocks. So it's still stuck. Ready for the next one?
Okay, ready for the next paragraph.
Go ahead.
The expert committee appointed in 2022 under Sanjay Kumar, former Director General of Forests, Environment Ministry, has held several meetings with state governments and has undertaken field visits in all states except Kerala. Sources aware of developments said that some of the fundamental issues the committee has sought to resolve are reconciliation of village level data, names, revenue details based on satellite imagery, and information provided by state governments. It has also considered formulations on providing some sort of financial incentives to the 6 states for protecting the Ghats, which could eventually be recommended in its final report to the center. The Kasturi Rangan committee panel had recommended that the 6 states should come together to negotiate for a grant in aid from the center in return for protecting natural resources. It also recommended some financial arrangement for payments for ecosystem services acquiring from ESA and non-ESA regions with the Ghats. Even as there has been progress on resolution, states have proposed further reduction in the ESA. It remains to be seen whether the expert committee will agree to reductions in its final report. Kerala and Karnataka remain the two states where consensus is not any closer. Karnataka has been steadfast in its total rejection of the Kasturi Rangan panel recommendations. Kerala, meanwhile, has sought to reduce the earlier 9,993.7 square kilometer area by another 1,000 square kilometer or so, arguing to omit villages from Idukki due to plantation agriculture activities, especially in Cardamom Hills. In Maharashtra, the state government has sought exclusion of 378 villages from the 2,133 notified in the draft notification, according to reliable sources. Sources said that the state has argued to omit villages for industries, mining, and because some villages are distant from ESAs.
Okay, so this paragraph shows where things stand now. The Sanjay Kumar committee appointed in 2022 is trying to resolve concrete issues like reconciling satellite data with state government records. And crucially, they're exploring financial incentives to compensate states for protecting these areas. The Kasturirangan panel had actually recommended this too, grants from the center and payments for ecosystem services. So states don't bear the entire cost of conservation. But even with that carrot being dangled, states keep asking for more cuts. Karnataka flatly rejects the whole thing. Kerala wants to reduce their ESA area by another 1,000 square kilometers because of cardamom plantations. Maharashtra wants 378 villages excluded because of mining and industry interests. So essentially, despite a decade of negotiations, multiple expert committees, and now financial incentives on the table, the states are still prioritizing short-term economic interests, mining revenues, agricultural land, over long-term ecological protection. Does that capture the frustration of the situation?
So the Kasturi Rangan committee had said to the states that if you are giving your land into the ESA, you should ask for the grants from the center, right? That is what the Kasturi Rangan committee had said, which the Sanjay Kumar committee will also be talking on, will also be a part of it.
Exactly right. The Kasturirangan panel essentially said, if you're protecting these areas instead of mining or farming them, you're losing potential revenue. So the center should compensate you through grants.
So the question which I had asked, due to the net issue, the Claude is not able to speak properly. So the question which I had asked is that, so the Kasturi Rangan committee has said to the states that if you are giving your land into the ESA, you should ask for the grants from the center. That is what the committee has said, which the Sanjay committee will also add in its report. So the reply of Claude is that the Kasturi Rangan panel essentially said, if you are protecting these areas instead of mining or farming them, you are losing potential revenue. So the center should compensate you through grants and payments for ecosystem services. It's a carrot approach, making conservation financially attractive to states instead of just imposing restrictions. The Sanjay Kumar committee is exploring the same idea, trying to figure out what financial arrangements would make states willing to accept the ESA designations. But here's the problem. Even with money on the table, states are still saying not enough and asking for bigger reductions. It shows the fundamental. I'm moving towards the next paragraph.
Sure, go ahead.
So the Ghats find their formation in a combination of factors such as tectonic movements, volcanic eruptions, and years of erosion. The continuous mountain chain with a break at Palakkad Gap is a treasure trove treasure trove of biodiversity, harboring hundreds of plants and animals only found in this region, and is one of the eight hottest hotspots of biological diversity. I need to get deeper and more depth I want on this specific paragraph.
All right, so this paragraph is shifting focus from politics to the actual ecology. It's explaining what makes the Western Ghats so special and why conservation matters so much scientifically. The formation part, tectonic movements, volcanic eruptions, erosion over millions of years, created a unique geography. That geological history shaped distinct ecosystems. The continuous mountain chain, with that one break at Palakat Gap, means you have isolated ecological zones that evolved separately, developing their own endemic species, plants and animals found nowhere else on Earth. That's why it's one of 8 global biodiversity hotspots. A biodiversity hotspot is defined as an area with exceptional concentrations of endemic species and facing extreme habitat loss. The Western Ghats has thousands of plant and animal species found only there. If you destroy it, those species vanish forever globally. That's irreplaceable. It's not just important for India, it's important for human knowledge and planetary biodiversity. Does that deepen your understanding?
Yeah, but I have few more questions. One is I wanted to go more deeper on to the geological history of the Western Ghats. Second, Palakkad Gap. What does it mean? I'm not able to understand. And third, you said that Western Ghats has thousands of plants and animals. There are plenty of species found there. And I wanted to know the famous one or top five famous species which are very unique and only to be found in Western Ghats.
Those are great questions, Raja. Let me search for detailed information on the geological history, what the Palakat Gap is, and the endemic species of the Western Ghats. Perfect! Now I have the information. Let me answer your 3 questions, Raja. On the geological history, the Western Ghats were formed about 150 million years ago when the supercontinent Gondwana broke apart. India separated from Africa and Madagascar, and the Indian plate drifted northward over massive volcanic hotspots. This volcanic activity created the Deccan Traps, layers of basalt rock that got pushed up, eventually forming the Western Ghats. So they're not mountains created by collision or folding like the Himalayas. They're more like an escarpment, a steep cliff face where the land was uplifted and then erosion carved out the valleys and ravines we see today. On the Palakat Gap, it's literally a break in the mountain chain, about 40 kilometers wide, between the Nilgiri Hills to the north and the Anaimalai Hills to the south, located between Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Think of it as a natural passage through otherwise continuous mountains. Ecologically, this matters because it separates the flora and fauna on either side. Species on the northern side evolved differently from those on the southern side because the gap prevented migration between them. On the famous endemic species, here are 5 iconic ones found only in the Western Ghats. The Leonti-eared macaque, a rare primate. The Nilgiri tahr, a wild mountain goat unique to the region. The Malabar giant squirrel, the largest tree squirrel in the world. The Nila orange flower with blows only once every 12 years. And the purple frog, which emerges only during monsoons. In fact, 50% of India's amphibians and 67% of fish species are found only in the Western Ghats.
Okay, the Palakkad Gap is a gap where the species who live on the southern part and the species who live on the northern part are not able to migrate from south to north or north to south because of this gap, right?
Exactly right, Raja. The Palakkad Gap acts as a barrier. Species on the northern side, like in the Nilgiri Hills, evolved separately from species on the southern side in the Anaimalai Hills because they couldn't cross this gap. So, over millions of years, they developed distinct populations with different characteristics, adapted to their specific environments. That's why you get unique species on each side. It's like the gap isolated them into two separate evolutionary zones. Ready for the next paragraph?
Yes, I will move to the next paragraph, but I wanted to understand in a very layman's language that what is the difference between the formation of Himalayas and the formation of Western Ghat, means how both are different.
Great question. In simple terms, the Himalayas were formed by collision. Two massive continental plates, the Indian plate and the Asian plate, crashed into each other about 45 million years ago. When they collided, the rock got crumpled and pushed upward, creating folded mountains. It's like pushing two pieces of paper together on a table. They buckle and fold upward. The Western Ghats, on the other hand, were formed by uplift and erosion. When India broke away from Gondwana, volcanic eruptions pushed hot magma upward, which lifted the western edge of the Deccan Plateau. Then, over millions of years, water and wind eroded away the softer rock, leaving behind a steep cliff-like escarpment. It's more like a faulted edge rather than a folded mountain. So, Himalayas are collision mountains, built by crashing plates pushing rock upward. Western Ghats are uplift mountains, built by volcanic activity lifting rock, then erosion shaping it into a dramatic escarpment. That's why the Himalayas are still growing and have higher peaks, while the Western Ghats are older and more eroded. Does that make sense?
So, Western Ghat basically formed when Gondwana continent merged with Indian continent.
Not quite. Let me clarify. Gondwana didn't merge with India. India was actually part of Gondwana. When Gondwana broke apart 150 million years ago, India separated from Africa and Madagascar and drifted away as its own plate. During that separation and drift, India passed over volcanic hotspots, which caused massive volcanic eruptions. That volcanism pushed the western edge of India upward, creating the Western Ghats. So it's the opposite. The Western Ghats formed because India broke away from Gondwana, not because they merged together. Does that clarify it?
Okay, so Gondwana continent has plenty of countries like Madagascar, African continent, Indian continent. So when the Indian continent, when India to be more precise, got away or got separated from Gondwana continent, and as when it was separating from the Gondwana continent, it passed from so many volcanic hotspots present beneath the water or somewhere around, due to which Western Ghats formed, right?
Exactly. You've got it perfectly, Raja. Gondwana was this massive supercontinent that had India, Africa, Madagascar, Australia, and Antarctica all connected together. When it started breaking apart, India separated and drifted northward. As India moved across the ocean floor, it passed over volcanic hotspots. These are areas where magma from deep in the earth pushes upward. That intense volcanic activity created massive eruptions and uplift, which eventually formed the Western Ghats on India's western edge. So the Western Ghats are essentially the scar left by India's journey northward across these volcanic zones. Ready for the next paragraph?
Before moving towards the next paragraph, I wanted to ask one more question. You said that Himalaya is still growing because two plates, the Indian plate and Asian plate, collided with each other, and it moved the rocks upwards, and it is still moving the rock upwards, due to which its peak is still increasing. Whereas the Western Ghats, when India got separated from the Gondwana continent, and when it passes over the volcanic hotspots, the volcanic eruptions moved the rocks upward, and its height got stopped.
Exactly right, Raja. The Himalayas are still actively growing because those two plates are still colliding and pushing against each other. The Indian plate continues moving northward, so the rock keeps getting compressed and pushed upward. That's why the Himalayas have the highest peaks and are still rising. The Western Ghats, on the other hand, had a one-time event. India passed over those volcanic hotspots and they pushed the land upward. But once India moved past them, that volcanic uplift stopped. Since then, for millions of years, erosion from rain, rivers, and wind has been wearing the Western Ghats down rather than building them up. So the Western Ghats reached their maximum height long ago and have been gradually eroding ever since. That's why they're lower and more eroded compared to the still growing Himalayas. Good understanding.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Raja. That was a really insightful set of questions. Ready to move to the next paragraph now, or do you want to take a breather?
There are only two more paragraphs left. So after reading it, we will end this article.
Perfect. Go ahead with the next paragraph whenever you're ready.
Its landform influences the monsoon by acting as a physical barrier against moisture carrying winds, giving bountiful rain on the coastal side of the Ghats. The abundant rain and dense forests also nurture springs and give life to Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri, Periyar, and numerous other rivers, which drive economic growth and sustain livelihood. Moreover, this region is not sparsely populated and has historically seen plantations and cultivation of pepper, cardamom, cinnamon, mango, and jackfruit. This necessitates conservation of the region from polluting industries. Kerala has seen civil society protest arguing for more protection and omission of villages from ESAs. Similar protests have also been seen in Goa, Karnataka, and Maharashtra.
Okay, so this paragraph is connecting everything together: ecology, economics, and the human dimension. The Western Ghats act as a barrier that pulls moisture from monsoon winds, creating heavy rainfall on the coastal side. That rain feeds the springs and rivers like Krishna, Godavari, and Kaveri, which are lifelines for agriculture and industry across multiple states. But here's the tension. The region is densely populated with plantations of pepper, cardamom, cinnamon, all valuable cash crops. So you've got a critical ecological zone that's also economically active and densely settled. What's interesting is the last part. Kerala's civil society is actually protesting in favor of more protection and exclusion of villages from ESAs. That's the opposite of what state governments want. Citizens are saying, protect the environment even if it means restrictions on us, while governments are pushing for fewer restrictions. Ready for the final paragraph?
That's it, all the paragraphs I have read.
Perfect, Raja. So we've gone through the entire article on Western Ghats ESA conservation. You've really dug deep into the geological history, the political tensions between center and states, the ecological significance, and the human dimension of the conservation debate. The core story is clear. The Western Ghats is irreplaceably important for biodiversity, water security, and climate, but it's also densely populated with economic interest. For 13 years, the center has been trying to implement conservation through ESA designation, but states keep resisting because it affects mining, agriculture, and development. Financial incentives are being explored, but the fundamental tension between long-term ecological protection and short-term economic interests remains unresolved. And interestingly, civil society in Kerala wants more protection, not less, which shows the divide between government priorities and citizen values. Great discussion today. How are the live stream numbers looking?
The live stream numbers, it's funny because I've did 55 minutes of live stream and yet no one has joined. But no worries. Above you have mentioned that the Western Ghat act as a barrier that pulls moisture from monsoon winds, creating heavy rainfall on the coastal side. I wanted to get more insight on this.
Sure. So imagine monsoon winds coming from the Arabian Sea carrying moisture-laden air toward India. When that air hits the Western Ghats, this massive mountain barrier, it's forced to rise. As air rises, it cools down. And when air cools, the moisture condenses into rain. So all that moisture falls on the western coastal side of the mountains as heavy rainfall. By the time the air crosses over the mountains and descends on the eastern side, most of that moisture is already gone. So the eastern side gets much less rain. That's why Kerala and coastal areas get intense rainfall during monsoons, while places just east of the Ghats get significantly less. The mountains literally squeeze the moisture out of the clouds. That's why the Western Ghats are so critical. They're the reason South India has these major river systems and abundant water. Without them, the entire water cycle and ecology of the peninsula would collapse.
Okay, got the entire point.
Great! So that wraps up the article discussion for today. You've covered the geological foundation, the political gridlock, the ecological importance, and the human complexity all in one deep dive. That's solid analysis, Raja. See you next time for another live stream session.
Okay, bye, and we will meet tomorrow for yet another live stream discussion.
Bye, Raja. Looking forward to it tomorrow. Keep up the great work with these deep dives. Your audience will appreciate the thoughtful analysis whenever they join in. Take care.
Take care, you too.
Thanks, Raja. See you tomorrow. Ciao.
So I'm ending this live session, and another. I would say that it's very worth it to spend the time with Claude, especially its voice assistant, and reading the article with it, and it actually makes the article reading so interesting and so easy to understand. Till then, thank you, and whoever watches it, I will be grateful. Okay, bye.